And finally, he claims that Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy VII Remake are both coming to the NX, and that the latter is actually going to be the definitive version on NX. We already know that Square's got NX dev kits. They're considering making games like Dragon Quest for the system, so it's not entirely unprecedented. But this one, he even says is a rumor. But he says the reason that Square wants to do it is because NX is apparently going to have better performance than the PS4. And that's Square's sentiment, not necessarily a reflection of what's actually going to end up being fact, but that's their motivation.
We've heard so many conflicting reports. NX will be more powerful than PS4, NX will be less powerful, NX will be about as powerful as Xbox One. Now, again, this one's saying more powerful. I'm not going to put any stock in that because this is him passing along information from someone, passing along information from someone speculating. I will say, when it comes to the Final Fantasy titles, I would imagine that Nintendo and Square Enix are in talks to bring Final Fantasy to NX. I do not necessarily believe that they are both already coming for sure, or that either one will be the definitive version. And an interesting point that my roommate actually brought up when we were having a discussion about this is if Nintendo wants games like Final Fantasy XV, they're going to have to put a Blu-ray player or some sort of crazy expensive proprietary disc system in their next console, because 25 gigabyte discs are just not going to cut it anymore for these massive third-party titles.
Well, it is if they're chopped up into pieces.
Yeah, well, if they're all episodic. But
Speaking of which, I think that at least the Final Fantasy VII part is true.
Yeah, with them including Cloud and Smash, it almost seems like they were making sure the Nintendo audience was familiar with that character and getting some hype for the franchise.
Yeah. I mean, they said specifically Cloud was just because Final Fantasy got a huge number of requests. Characters were all over the place, but Cloud was far and away the most consistent and far and away the most popular. So we know that promoting Final Fantasy VII was not their primary motive, but it could be a little nice bonus for them.
I'll chip in that I definitely think Square is working on Final Fantasy for NX. I think that given their relationship with Nintendo in recent years and how Nintendo's kind of been one of the stronger pillars of their business, at least from a not losing money standpoint, it would be kind of crazy for them to miss out on the opportunity to foster that partnership more with their bigger budget games, the games that they need to succeed more. I'm not so sure that we can take the idea that the Final Fantasy VII Remake will be the definitive version on NX at face value, though, because I think, if anything, the fact that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is launching first on PS4, which is something that we've already heard, would mean that any later port would probably be improved in some kind of way, so that even if it's not kind of the best version or the biggest version or the one that sells the most, it'll be improved. So I don't know that means that they're targeting for it to be the definitive version, but it will probably be better than the PS4 version in some tangible way.
All right. So, Final Fantasy XV, nobody's really talked much about the... Ben, I know you mentioned the Blu-ray player. I think that they could make a disc system that... Well, first of all, we don't know that the NX is going to still use discs. There are these crazy patents coming out.
Yeah, it's possible that, they've seen patents for discless.
So I think there's just way too many question marks in that to use that as a reference point to say whether this is true or trubbish. But anyone else have thoughts on Final Fantasy 15?
I think it'll come. I think Square Enix is interested in bringing their Final Fantasy games to as many platforms as they possibly can, not just the ones that are the most popular platforms, but the ones that they can just squeeze the game onto. And I think NX will qualify for that.
All right.
I think it really depends on the hardware, both in terms of how much power it has. That's more so towards the definitive version type of thing. But also just how easy it is to program for, because Wii U is way harder to program for than PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and we don't know if that's going to be the case with NX or not. But if it's going to cost a lot to port and Final Fantasy 15 is going to be a massive game, so if it's going to cost them a lot to port it to NX, then I don't know necessarily if it's going to happen. It kind of depends on what Wii U's architecture is like, or NX's architecture is like, and what kind of start it gets off to.
Well, I'd say for sure it'd be suicide for Nintendo to release an NX that wasn't easy to port to. So from that perspective, it makes sense that Square Enix would be targeting ports of these games now. I don't know if that means NX has better performance than PS4, which is sort of the last component of this rumor, I think.
Right. Well, that was Square's sentiment.
Well,
So
I think
I don't know
looking-
that we should even really discuss that too much.
Well, all I'll say on that subject is if you look at how Wii U was in some ways an improvement on Xbox 360 and PS3, even though the CPU itself was actually weaker, I think it'd be feasible, even if the NX isn't, in terms of sheer horsepower better than the PS4, it would still be possible for them to get pretty decent performance that matches or exceeds the PS4.
Yeah, that's true. So, moment of truth or moment of trubbish. Which is it?
I'm gonna lean toward true.
All right.
I will say mostly true.
Mostly true, but a little bit of trubbish.
No, not necessarily a little bit of trubbish. I would say it's trubbish that it's confirmed. It's trubbish to think that these games are both definitely coming to NX.
No, I mean...
But I think it's absolutely true that they're in talks to make this happen.
Yeah, he even said it was a rumor. He said it was in plans. He didn't say it was for sure gonna end up happening, but that's just the plan for now. I think it's a little bit of true, a little bit of trubbish. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. But certainly what high expectations people have for this are trubbish. But I think there's a solid nugget of truth in this rumor, and whether or not it ultimately plays out, I think they're in talks, yeah. Hello everybody, thank you for listening to this Nintendo Week clip, NWC. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to us here on YouTube for more highlights and discussion videos from Nintendo Week podcast, or subscribe to us on iTunes for weekly breakdowns of all your Nintendo news, discussion segments on subjects, games, and more, and tons of other features. Thanks for listening, and we will see you tomorrow with another NWC.